Welcome on, welcome all. Thank you for tuning into Cedarly Radio, your guide to films playing at the Art House for the week of March 15th to March 21st. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Dave Huffman. On this week's episode, we'll be discussing Climax, The Wedding Guest, Combat Obscura, and Birds of Passage.
We'll also be discussing Cats Murdering Toddlers, it's not as bad as it sounds, Filthy Films, and our Cedarly 3 picks for Best Drug Films. We always like to start off the show with the last scene first. So, Dave, what is the last film you've seen?
The last movie I saw, Aaron, was a true weird little movie called Island of Death from 1976 by Nico Mastorakis. And it is just a weird little gem of a movie that I've never heard of until like last week. I actually watched it twice in this last week. It is a disgusting piece of filth from the 70s. If you like exploitation movies, I would highly recommend it.
What style exploitation, though?
It's set in Greece. The description of the movie is like something like two perverts go on a murder spree in Greece, you know. And
like Hicksploitation, as you mentioned before?
No. They're like just this couple that, you know, they're in beautiful Greece, and like they're apparently being. The plot makes no sense. Like it's just him on this kind of like he's taking pictures of all of their crimes so he can document them for later sexual pleasure, apparently. And it's just a very strange movie. And the director, producers, they decided they saw how much money Texas Chainsaw Massacre was making. And they said, well, if that's making a lot of money, we're going to make something even more like over the top. But it's not. I mean, it's got a lot of violence. It's got a lot of sex. It's got a lot of everything. But it is so weird and perverse that, of course, it ended up being banned in almost every country. So it was like one of those movies that was like not available forever. And then it finally came out. Like Arrow put it out on DVD in Europe a couple years ago.
Arrow or Vinegar Syndrome?
It was Arrow, yeah. And now but it's on Amazon Prime. So feel free to just stream it and just your mind will reel. It is one of my new favorite like good bad movies. I will watch that 100 times before I die, I guarantee it. And someone will, like, listening to this podcast, will watch that and then think, what is wrong with that guy?
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're a fan of really kind of, you know, like bad taste things like Pink Flamingos and stuff like that.
Which you are.
Which I am. Yeah. It is along that vein. I mean, it is definitely, there's a scene that, just like in Pink Flamingos, that I can't fully endorse because of sort of an animal issue.
Sure.
But then again, I don't know if they actually did something to that poor little animal. But it's really very entertaining in the most filthy, wonderful way.
I love that no matter how much you get into film, and like we've been, you know, studying and watching films for years and years, or I guess decades at this point. We're old enough to say that, and that still some stuff still pops up, especially from eras that like I've read a ton about 70s exploitation. You're like, I've never even heard of this one, and you get really excited, and there's still gems out there.
Well, this is how bad it is. So I texted my friend after I watched it, and I said, "How come I've never heard of this movie?" And he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "You actually brought it back for me from England whenever it was only when I was in a trip to London. I bought it for him.
It was in your hands.
It was one of them, but I didn't really pay attention. It was just like he wanted to he sent me a list. He's like, pick this up when you're there. It's cheaper, blah blah blah. So I just bought things at the store, and I never even watched it. And so this could have been in my life at least a few years ago.
You already muled it into the country once.
I smuggled in filth, but it was very entertaining. And but again, definitely not for everybody.
Right.
Do not watch it if you are offended by anything. It is not for you.
I feel like that statement's going to apply a few times throughout this particular episode as we talk about some of the movies that are coming out this week.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you with my last scene.
Oh, yes.
Does a collection of YouTube videos that were of a feature-length variety about how the supremely wealthy are building underground bunkers right before the Earth's magnetic poles are going to switch and plasma is going to come from the sun and end civilization, does that count as a last scene? Or
we'll say that it does, although I was expecting you to segue. I thought that setup, I thought you were going to say was actually you went to the CatVideo Fest.
That was the setup, because that's what I was watching last night. But technically the last thing I saw that was a film played in theaters at a feature length was CatVideo Fest. Right. So we can head right into, you know, like at the Art House this week. That was definitely the big event going on here. I was a total cynic about this. It came up and I was like, sure. And then tickets started going flying off. So I was like, great. No, I mean, anybody wants to come out and, you know, experience something in the theater, you know, with a big group of people, with a big community of people. That's great. That's what I love. But I was just like, you know what? I have YouTube. Like my kids show me cat stuff all the time. But then, of course, I mentioned to the kids, they're like, we're going. I was like, yeah, of course we'll go. It's no problem. And then within like 5 minutes, it completely won me over and I was in love and it was an amazing experience. There's a sold out crowd. And within just a few clips of the videos, you realize there's all the little emotional kind of endorphin hits you get with like, oh, that's adorable, or like, that's hilarious. Right. And the ups and downs you get when you watch something with a crowd in a theater, a general narrative film will say, like something that has like a big reveal ending, like a Shyamalan style ending or whatever. And then everybody is like, wait, what? And you feel that within the crowd at the end. You know, there's an hour and a half build up and you get that release. This was like every 40 seconds.
Is that cat going to knock that off the counter? It is going to knock it off the counter.
Well, okay, in the first little bit, there's a shot like out a back porch and there's a cat sitting in the yard and there's a bunch of wooden stuff.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. And there's a baby black bear coming in and into frame. And the lady behind me just immediately was like, oh, no. I was like, I don't think at CatVideo Fest they're going to show you a kitten being mauled. And then it turns out the cat does a pounce, the bear freaks out and climbs a tree, and he's just hilarious. Like scared up in the tree, and the cat's like, yeah, I did my job, and walks away. So it's just little tiny narratives like that just popped up, and there's some were touching, and some were, you know, you roll a tear because it's a little sad.
Well,
but
one of my personal favorite subreddits, I don't know if you subscribe to any of, if you go on Reddit much.
I do quite a bit.
Well, one of my favorite ones is called Cats Murdering Toddlers. It's a great subreddit.
I'm going to write that one down.
Of just, it's very entertaining. It is just literally videos of, you know, kids being tripped by cats, or a kid playing with a cat that goes a little too far and then the cat lashes out. It's highly entertaining.
Actually, the conspiracy subreddit was where I ran across my YouTube videos that I was watching the other night about underground bunkers and whatnot. So,
all right. So it's been a mixed bag of things we've watched.
It really
week.
has. Yeah,
well,
it's all over the place. The other one I wanted to mention from this past weekend was Everybody Knows. The Javier Bardem, Penelope Cruz, Oscar Friday film.
Did very well here.
It did very well, and I'm totally in love with our audiences right now because we've had Shoplifters, we've had Cold War, we've had Capernaum, we've had Never Look Away. Week after week, we're having there's also the synchronicity of having quality foreign films coming in right now, and they're supporting them. We don't have just like, you know, oh, no one's out for this movie. They're really supportive of these foreign films right now.
Everybody Knows is actually going to be expanding starting this Friday to Chagrin and Capitol Theater as well. That's because good. It did so well here.
Yeah, because the word of mouth people coming out too. Yeah. I haven't got to see it yet. So it's one of those that I know it's sort of, you know, thriller mystery-ish based.
Twist.
So as that movie starts letting out, I have a rule: if I don't want anything spoiled for me, I wait until all the credits are done, everyone's out, then we go clean, because people will hang out and they'll just Greta. I'm not going to say it now, but lady came out like, oh, how was it? What'd you see today? Oh, Greta. Oh, I knew at the end when blah blah blah. I was like,
I knew that was
seriously.
Yep.
Come on, not everybody is seeing this here. And I want to mention too, Apollo 11 we opened this weekend, and I love checking in with documentaries at the box office because traditionally, previous to last year with Three Identical Strangers and RBG and Won't You Be My Neighbor, documentaries don't usually get that much press for.
Did you say Free Solo?
And Free Solo. Shoot. Yeah, you're right. I love that. Yeah, there's so many docs that were hits last year that you lose track of them.
The one that just won the Oscar.
One of my favorites. But Apollo 11's almost at 4 million box office, which is really, really strong. And it's one of those great ones, too, where you're seeing like whole families come out and people with NASA t-shirts on. 4 different people I saw the Apollo 11 t-shirts on seeing the movie this week, which is great.
I was actually noticing it is the first film that I can think of in a long time that actually has a G rating.
I saw that too, especially at the art house. It's very
rare. And even like most animated films are almost always generically just rated PG because for whatever reason. You know?
In I think it was in The Shadow of the Moon when we played that documentary. I think I have that title right. That one I believe is PG, and I looked up, I was like, what is objectionable in this movie? It was for incidental smoking. So just because the period had people that smoked. So like that apparently is a PG right away.
One of my favorite things is looking at the rating reason, you know, and they say incidental. Sometimes it says historical smoking.
Yes,
which I think is hilarious. Too, and there is a movie that we're going to be showing here coming up. I can't remember which movie it was, but I even tweeted out the rating reason because I thought it was funny. It's rated PG-13. Oh, it's Peterloo. It's rated PG-13 for violence or for a scene of violence and chaos.
Nice. Chaos.
It's like caution, parents. This film contains chaos.
Well, the minute we start talking about Climax, that one is his first rated R movie that he's made, and I'm going to look that up immediately when we're done recording to see what that one's rated for, because I feel like chaos should be in all of Gasper and Noé's
really
films.
Good.
And then to follow up, last week we did our Cedarly 3 picks for films we were looking forward to in 2019, and within a few days of that episode posting, I noticed, I think it was on IndieWire or someplace online that they had mentioned, is this the year of the auteurs? And they were saying that it's really early Oscar, predictions because it's, only March. But the list of auteurs that have films coming out this year, my first thought was like, we mentioned Scorsese and Claire Denis. Tarantino's got one coming up. Soderbergh's got, I think, his second film now of 2019 coming up later on. But like Ang Lee's in the mix this year, Rian Johnson. I noted Mariel Heller because we've played her first 2 feature films. She's doing the Tom Hanks. Won't You Be My Neighbor,
right, the Mr.
Rogers film called A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, but also Greta Gerwig. I'd forgotten she's got Little Women coming up this year. Jordan Peele, new auteur to the mix. He's got Us coming up, which you mentioned last week. Almodovar, one of your favorites.
I love Almodovar.
Should be coming out this year. And Noah Baumbach. That'll probably end up Netflix, but whatever.
Well, Noah Baumbach is definitely it's his last film was so good though that went to Netflix.
The Meyerowitz story.
Yeah, the Meyerowitz story was very, very good.
Yeah.
But not every one of his movies is like what was that? Greenberg? Is that the?
Oh, you don't like that one? We've talked about that before.
I'm still sitting here hating it right now. So I'm still angry about Greenberg. That was one of the ones that like sometimes the studios after movies out they'll send me like DVDs like say, hey, thanks for your support during blah 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 blah. I literally threw it away. It's like thank you for the gift.
For nothing.
It is going in the garbage. I want to stop.
Not even worth a regift.
Not even worth it. I want to do that to somebody. That's buyer beware. That's what that DVD should have had a big sticker on it.
A little advisory sticker right across the front.
Sticker. Mm-hmm.
Coming up next will be the 4 new films opening this week here at Theater. The first new film opening this week is Climax from writer-director Gasper Noé. This synopsis for this one is French dancers gather in a remote, empty school building to rehearse on a wintry night. The all-night celebration morphs into a hallucinatory nightmare when they learn their sangria is laced with LSD. That couldn't be more of a Gasper Noé description, I don't think.
Yeah.
And we just mentioned just a moment ago about the ratings here. So Climax has a rated R, is an R rating, which is significant because his movies have traditionally been not rated.
Right.
They just released them unrated, and they definitely would be NC-17 if they were rated.
Some of them, yes. Yeah.
I mean, all the recent ones in memory, I think, are. Maybe I Stand Alone, but...
Yeah, I think you're right.
So Climax is rated R and I don't believe this is a spoiler thing.
No.
Because it's on the poster if you read closely.
This is the official MPAA warning about the film, why it's rated R.
Disturbing content involving a combination of drug use, violent behavior, and strong sexuality, and for language and some graphic nudity. So
again, I love some graphic nudity,
just some,
but just one of my things years ago. I got into kind of a heated debate, shall we say, with a representative from the MPAA at a conference about how I didn't understand how they can rate something like just unilaterally across the board, and this is just one of those things that drives me crazy because I know the MPAA is there for parents as a means of guiding them, and there's not a whole lot of parents that are probably even thinking about taking their kids to see Climax.
No.
and the parent that would think about taking their kid to see Climax clearly doesn't care. You know what I mean?
So it crossed my mind to show my daughter, once it's on home video, the very first scene, because it's like a 10, 11 minute, all one take dance sequence. It's perfectly safe, just that one scene. It's perfectly safe for any age to see because it's just a dance scene with all these dancers and it's amazing choreography. And I should have mentioned my daughter takes 3 dance classes. She's in the dance and everything. So it made sense. And she watches a lot of musicals with me. But no. After that. It's,
after that, no. Yeah. But I mean, people that are familiar with his works, he is a provocateur.
Very much,
and he, some of his films make linear narrative sense, other ones do not. So it just depends what you're in the mood for. If you're not a fan of his previous films, this probably isn't going to be one that you want to start with, but at the same time, other people have said that it's more accessible.
I was going to say it might be though, because his previous films definitely have that edge to me of we should say he did I Stand Alone, which is a very little seen movie that he did, I think his first feature film, but then he did Irreversible, which made quite an impression,
very much so,
on the film festival art house circuit. And the Cinematheque played it too, because I was at all those screenings.
Were you? Wow.
Yeah, I
not a lot of people want to watch Irreversible twice.
Yeah.
I remember I talked about throwing away my Greenberg DVD.
Yes.
I had someone years ago give me their copy of Irreversible because they didn't want it in their house anymore. They were like, I bought this, I watched it. You can have it.
I totally understand that, and now I do feel a little vulnerable saying that I did see it 3 times in theaters, and then I've watched it twice since then on home video.
It's a brilliant movie. It's just not a pleasant experience. And
no, it's not.
There's a difference because some people don't mind a challenging movie,
right?
And that is definitely a challenging movie.
I was going to say that's why he's one of my favorite kind of the provocateur realm of like Nicholas Winding Refn. I would say is kind of in there too. Harmony Korine to a point, which we'll mention here in a second.
Lars von Trier.
I would have said when I started off in film school, one of my big inspirations inspirations, who was still working in feature films at the time, was Gregor Araki, because he had these real strong French New Wave connections with Godard and what he was doing with his first few early movies with jump cuts and non-linear storytelling. And when I first saw Gasper Noé, Irreversible was the first one of his I saw. So I was like, I'm hooked. What is this guy doing? Like, because one of the things of film that interests me the most is when people really push the boundaries of like what you can do in a movie, also what you can show in a movie.
Yeah.
Within taste. I don't know, what was the Greek film you mentioned at the top of the show? Like
Island of Death.
There's sometimes within the realms of taste where like that's bad taste, but it's still kind of fun.
Right.
And some people would say that Gasper Noé is in bad taste and probably shouldn't be making movies. And he is that polarizing director where I don't meet a lot of people that are like, Irreversible, it's okay.
It's okay.
Or Enter the Void, it's okay. Like you like them and you're interested, or you're just like, it's the worst piece of trash you've ever seen.
So he can be a very divisive person. Right. I remember though when we showed Love in 3D, here and also at our theater in Pittsburgh, that I actually had a couple of people send emails thanking us for showing it because they didn't think they'd ever have a chance to see it. You know what I mean? And that's what makes the Cedar Lee great, because you do have access to see challenging films.
The role of the art house theater
is.
And then if you don't want to see it, don't
watch it.
Come and watch it. It's really easy to not come watch a movie.
I don't understand people when they complain about stuff. It's like, just don't watch it. There you go.
Since you mentioned like kind of how he's got a lot of nonlinear storytelling, this one is linear because you're watching the effects of the LSD kick in.
Right.
But also I read an interview with him that he shot this in chronological order, which is not normally how you shoot films at all. But it does make sense with the narrative where you're watching it slowly kick in and it slowly disintegrate to all these really talented dancers who use their body to express themselves, and what happens when your brain's kind of wired differently for a while and it doesn't really work that way.
The film looks like it basically all takes place kind of in one kind
it's all one kind of closed setting.
And that's probably why he could shoot it linearly, because the reason you shoot a film out of sequence is for budgetary reasons, because you
go in
have
here
to
on this
just
day
go
or
there. But if you're going to be in one place, you have the luxury of being able to do that. And I would imagine the performers in the film, it makes their life easier because you can maintain the motivation.
Oh, absolutely,
without having to have your dramatic scene before the thing that triggers it. You know what I mean? So
especially when you're working with a director who brought to you and cast you in a movie when he had a 5-page script to work with, which is what he did on this movie, and he cast a bunch of professional dancers and perform. I mean, they're all professionals, and a 5-page script, and only the first dance scene was choreographed. Everything else they just improvised and worked that way, which sounds terrifying though if you're going to go in and make a film. Like you have to really know what you're doing. And I'm thinking, since this one is getting a lot of rave reviews, because his other movies don't get a lot of critic love either necessarily. Some critics love it, but some critics they're just like, why is this guy still making movies? Maybe if he's just running on his film instincts and he doesn't have like the script that he's laboring over, and it is a bit shoot from the hip, and it's more collaborative too, because you're working with all these professional dancers and cinematographer and everything, that maybe this is but the better wheelhouse for him to work in is just his instincts kick in and run the whole show rather than tons of pre-production.
Well, and if you're in the mood for something that's maybe a little less challenging than Climax, we're also opening a new thriller called The Wedding Guest, directed by Michael Winterbottom, and that is about a British Muslim man on his journey across Pakistan and India, and it is kind of a more traditional thriller.
But how long do you want the car?
2 weeks.
Would you like the full insurance, Mr. Awan?
Yeah.
Do you speak English?
Yeah, a little. Here for wedding.
Yes.
Come.
I'm a friend of Samira. She's marrying Samar tomorrow. You have another one? You have 2? Everyone's sleeping in there. Samira? Sleeping in there?
What do you want? What do you want?
I don't want to be married.
It's also kind of kicking off as I was looking at, I like Deb Patel as an actor, and the last film we played here that he starred in was Lion, which was a huge hit for us one holiday season ago. But then I looked up his filmography. This is like the year of Deb Patel coming up.
He's in a lot of movies.
Even like within a couple of weeks, we're opening Hotel Mumbai, which he is a co-star in. And then he's in David Lowery's new one, Green Knight, which should be later this year. And then he's also got Armando Iannucci. His next film is called David Copperfield. Charles Dickens, not magician, and Deb Patel is starring in that.
Although
one.
I want to see Deb Patel as David
I want to see him do both.
Magician.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
would be amazing. But I'm usually a big fan of Michael Winterbottom's films. So I mean, he did all the Trip movies. We call them, the Steve Coogan movies.
Yes.
So we've played I think all 3 of them here. Correct? Yeah.
So far, yeah.
And
I'm sure they're going to keep going.
Right, and he's a fairly prolific filmmaker. So
absolutely, he's like 2-3 movies a year sometimes.
So I'm very interested in some of his movies. When you talk about his films, he did have a reputation of being a little bit of a provocator. Like he was not afraid of having
24 party people
sex
and
things like that in his film. So it's interesting to see him kind of settling into those very pleasant, fun comedies of the Trip series, and then this one, which is a more traditional thriller, where you're talking about a filmmaker that can kind of jump genres, and he's definitely one of those filmmakers.
I'd really recommend, if you haven't checked out the trailer for this one as well, it's a textbook example of how you do a great thriller trailer, where within the first few images you see a guy traveling, going through security, acquiring a gun, renting a car. It looks like he's abducting someone on her wedding night, but then she kind of just like is in the car with him, and so it's like, I don't know if it's really an abduction or he's rescuing her, and then it just leaves you with like,
it doesn't
what's
show
going
you the
on?
entire movie.
Like it's just all the setup, and you're like, I'm interested.
Right.
The third film we are opening this week is Combat Obscura from director Miles Lagoze. Lagoze served in Afghanistan. He was the role of combat camera in his Marine Corps group.
Get right here, dude. Get a better shot.
That had to be one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Gotta have only some video, goddamn.
Hey, Mom, hey, Dad, everybody, I'm doing good in Kajaki, Afghanistan. The boys are taking care of me. I just want y'all to know I love you, and can't wait to come home.
All of the footage that he shot and some of his fellow cameramen shot, he's assembled into this particular documentary, which takes a look at the longest running war in American history, the Afghan War. We've mentioned before on the show, usually when we do our Cedarly 3 picks for certain themes of films, then we realize, there's a whole subgenre here I hadn't really paid attention to. And aside from being unfiltered reportage from the front lines in the Afghanistan conflict as it is now. Again, it's the longest running war in American history. This is sort of like the current update kind of movie version of that, where you're not getting it filtered through a particular news outlet lens. It's just from just the people that were there and they were there. This goes way back to even when I started working here in 2006, we had a documentary called The War Tapes. There's also, we'd had like Armadillo over the years, the battle for Marja, Restrepo a couple years ago.
Yeah, Restrepo was
I had no
more than
idea.
a couple years ago, but yeah.
Right, Restrepo was 2010. Again, longest running conflict.
Yeah,
covered from all these different angles that like it's its own subgenre of kind of like military documentary reporting or folks in the military, I should say. Because this isn't like a straight up like Marines propaganda film of what's going on. It's the actual boots on the ground. Here's what we're seeing.
And I haven't had a chance to see this one, but what I've read about it, it sounds very good, and the reviews are very strong for it. And I think that I worry about a movie like this right now because people are so burnt out politically from
that is the worry,
that I worry that they won't be like, I want to go see that new war documentary. But I would encourage people, again, this is an important film to see and be aware of what is going on and seeing it from the actual perspective of the people involved.
Right. And it's it premiered at the True False Film Festival, which is a great festival to keep track of their programming because it's all just documentary work, and they do a lot of selections from different genres and styles of documentary as well, and it got great reviews there. It's also the worry too when anytime we're open 4 movies at once in 1 week, I'm like, something's going to fall through the cracks for the general audience unless you're here just obsessively all week long.
And Combat Obscura, it actually is specifically booked for just 1 week. So if you are interested in seeing it, you only do have a week to come see it here.
See that perfect segue I gave you?
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's how it
I
works
love
sometimes.
It. And then the final film we're opening this week is an excellent new drug cartel film called Birds of Passage, directed by Cristina Gallego and Ciro Guerra. This is Ciro Guerra, who's the director of Embrace of the Serpent, but he partnered up with Cristina Gallego on this film. It is a multi-generational kind of story about this family that ascends to becoming, a huge drug trafficking family in Colombia, and kind of an indigenous people of the area, and just a brutal, great film.
I assume it ends happy, right? Because that's how these usual multi-generational drug dynasty, drug trafficking movies, it always just ends on a happy
You know what
note,
they
right?
say, crime pays.
Right,
so, so it is, but it is a really visually amazing movie. It's very beautifully shot, and it also has some compelling kind of cultural issues that you're not aware of, sort of about the indigenous people and how the sort of, they don't like other people in their culture. You know what I mean? Like they don't want, this is like a closed group. Like you're not part of us. You're not one of this group. You're part of that group. We don't trust you because historically you're just not one of us.
That thematically ties with Embrace of the Serpent a bit too as well.
So, so that was a film that was used completely, basically following around a non-professional indigenous actor. We did that one episode talking about non-professional actors.
Exactly.
That was a film we could have talked about.
Absolutely.
It was great. And this also has some performers that are not professional actors. And it's just a really good drug cartel movie, which is why for our Cedar 3 pick this week, we wanted to talk about some of our other favorite drug-related films.
Our Cedar 3 picks, as Dave just mentioned, for this week were inspired by Birds of Passage, which is a multi-generational, drug trafficking kind of film. So we were generally just saying drug films, but that could also mean trippy films or, movies that make you feel like you're on drugs, which we'll get to, I think, in a few weeks because Harmony Korine's got The Beach Bum coming out, and that seems thematically more the way to go. We meant more because Birds of Passage is looking at sort of the ins and outs of the drug trade and internationally how that sort of works. And a lot of times when we're putting together, every time I'm putting together my Cedar 3 list, I like to keep in mind like documentaries, foreign films, classic films, and see if that applies to whatever genre we're talking about. And within this one, I immediately went to, have you read or seen too much on the Mexican narco cinema?
Yes.
That one came to mind, and I was looking at some examples of it, and I've seen a few of them, but the ones I've seen at least are just sort of terrible. Like there are kind of like just B movies that are a lot of times just celebrating drug culture in somewhat uncomfortable way for my personal taste. But I ended up going with looking at the different aspects of the drug trade. You've kind of got the user end, you've got the dealer end, and then one of mine also has there's a journalistic end too, because there's several movies where people are trying to uncover, what's going on with, in the drug trade itself and trying to expose, the illegality of the drug trade.
All right. So what's the first one on your list?
With that in mind, I went with a flawed movie, but I find it entertaining nonetheless. It's a documentary called Cocaine Cowboys from 2006. Billy Corben directed that one and the sequel, and then there's also been some spin-offs, some TV movies about the grandmother who ran the cartel in that one. Cocaine Cowboys it's a mess of a documentary. I'll give it that, and it relies on interviews with several unreliable subjects. I'll give them that, but it's sort of the center of that movie to me that was really fascinating. I knew nothing of the cocaine trade or Miami specifically, and it profiles Miami and how much Miami when there was this economic boom there. Miami is built on cocaine money.
Basically, yes.
Essentially. And I was like,
anyone that watched Miami Vice knows that.
Right. And I don't like that movie, so I didn't pick that one.
Not the movie, the TV show.
Either one. I don't like either one. But it was just one of those, I was like, wait, what happened? And I remember that whole segment in the middle where they're really going into the economics of cocaine in Miami. And you're like, this metropolis would not be here if it wasn't for cocaine money. It's absolutely nuts. But also the shocking level of violence. And they have news footage showing a machine gun shootout at a mall. You're like, I was 4 years old or whatever when it happens. I wouldn't have heard that on the news. But it's a shocking movie, but deeply flawed as far as documentary goes. But the content itself, you're just like, wow. I can't believe that happened. It's a very Wild West vibe.
Well, the first one on my list is, a film that I think a lot of people probably dismiss just because of its pedigree. But I think it's a really entertaining, good movie and a look at a true story here in America. And that was American Made from just a couple years ago, the Tom Cruise movie.
Oh, yes.
Directed by Doug Liman, who, of course, did Edge of Tomorrow, which is a great film. He's a very solid filmmaker. And, Tom Cruise gets, a lot of people love or hate him, too.
Yes.
He comes with his own baggage, but I think there's a reason why Tom Cruise is a movie star, and when he's in the right zone, no one does it better, and this is one of those things. And it's a true story of a guy who became a pilot who became basically a CIA operative, shuttling back and forth drugs, basically completely, unbeknownst to half of the U.S. government, it was being sanctioned by the U.S. government. And then, as they're trying to do this arms exchange with, the Contras and all this stuff, and ultimately almost brought down the Reagan White House. So it's this very interesting story, and they've made this great pop entertainment film out of it. And it's really very entertaining. I've seen it a couple of times, and I would highly recommend it because it really shows you a side of that story that if you only saw Oliver North testifying on, in front of Congress, you don't know know the rest of the story. And there's just this charismatic pilot guy who kind of, was the center of it all.
Bobby Seale?
I can't remember the actual guy's name. You might be right.
Because he's mentioned in Cocaine Cowboys, but spoiler alert, he doesn't last too long. But I guess but he's mentioned in Cocaine Cowboys as like the pilot, like he's the key guy who's drug running all this stuff in for the United States authorities.
And what's the next one on your list, Aaron?
I'm going to skip to one because it ties perfectly into what we're just talking about. I didn't realize it was going to thematically tie together so well, but another slightly flawed movie, but I still like it nonetheless. I've seen it a few times, and it hits that button of I love journalistic movies, and it would be Kill the Messenger from 2014, directed by Michael Cuesta. It stars Hawkeye from the Avengers. I totally blanking on his name right now. Jeremy Renner as Gary Webb, based on a true story. Gary Webb originally started off at the Plain Dealer here in Cleveland, and then moved out to the San Jose Mercury News, San Jose Mercury Sun.
Either way,
the San Jose paper. And it's also one of those kind of bygone eras of newspaper journalism that you see in it, because he's at a bureau not in San Jose. I think in California. I've watched it a few times. I should know all this detail by now. But he exposes the CIA connection to the cocaine trade.
Yep.
And it's a really good central performance. And it's just a guy who was a dogged journalist, just knew what he was doing, knew how to just get people talking, got his hands on the right information and contacted the right people.
We did play it here.
We played it here. Yeah,
we
played for a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's a good journalistic story, but it also ties in like with the toll it takes on your family life when you're pursuing, like he's going down to like Colombian prisons to meet with ex-drug lords. And like, it's very dangerous stuff, but he's like, I'm pursuing the story. He goes to like the airstrip where Bobby Seale was like landing planes and smuggling in cocaine, and army officers and drug traffickers and gangsters like pull up and like he's in danger all the time. And he's just a dude reporting, trying to uncover the story. It did end tragically because he committed suicide. I'm doing air quotes because it was one of those 2 shots to the head suicides, and there's some questions about that. But it's a really good movie, and it deals with kind of exposing to the public what has been going on in secret in movies like American Made.
And of course, I remember the reason I said I couldn't remember if it played here, I knew I saw it at the Cedar Lee, but I remember watching it at the press screening. And of course, we had people from the Plain Dealer at the press screening who knew him.
Yeah.
So it had this extra layer
very
of
close to home.
Strange kind of personal connection that some of them had to it.
Yeah.
And well, the next film on my list, I don't know, maybe it's going to be on your list, is Steven Soderbergh's film Traffic from 2000, because I know you're a huge fan of Soderbergh.
I did not put it on my list, but it was close.
It is one of those movies that literally I've been wanting to rewatch. I saw it twice, I think, when it came out.
Yeah.
And I keep scrolling past it, and I'm like, I'm going to revisit Traffic. And I meant to do it before the show, and of course I didn't have time because I was too busy watching Island of Death twice. But you got to get your cinematic priorities
straight, yeah.
But it is, it's a brilliant movie.
Yes.
So he won his Oscar for directing it. And if you haven't seen Traffic, it's got fantastic performances. Benicio del Toro won his Oscar for that as well.
Supporting actor.
It's just a really great movie. And you talk about seeing the drug traffic thing from both sides in that film.
Oh yeah, all sides.
Seeing it, and that's what makes it such an amazing, layered, complex structure of a film, and it's really compelling.
That one, when it came out too, was sort of the precursor to the Hollywood trend of doing like the multi-character ensemble that all comes together in one sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Which I guess it hit its peak with Crash winning Best Picture. I know, shiver, but. I
don't like to think that those are related.
They're not so far. Well, yeah.
Don't tie those in. Don't tie those together, Aaron. Shame on you.
No, I debated Traffic, but I was trying to do a different kind of sampling of different styles there, and I ended up.
It seemed like an obvious choice for you. I think that's why you
maybe that was it too. Yeah, because
you wanted to do a deeper dive.
Some of these are like, you want to recommend other things that like maybe people missed, which is why like I saved the last one. I was scrolling through, just doing some internet searches, like, oh, that one. Actually, I felt that way with Belly, but I didn't want to go with Belly because I haven't seen that one in a while. Gridlock'd from 1997, starring
Gridlock'd.
Tim Roth and Tupac. It's so good. It's written and directed by Vondi Curtis Hall, based on some personal experience and things that he saw in the Detroit music scene when he was a young man. There are 2 characters called Stretch and Spoon. Great nicknames, but they're in a band together with Tandy Newton is in there too as a co-star. Early on in the movie, she dies of a heroin overdose, and they're like, "We got to get clean." I mean, it's the inciting incident. I'm not spoiling anything. It's the first few minutes of the movie. They're in a band together, kind of a spoken word, kind of jazz, free flow kind of band. And so it's Tupac and Tim Roth in one day, just like, we got to get clean. So this is sort of like the user story on the end of the drug trade, the drug war, and it's just they go through all this bureaucracy of trying to check into rehab, and it just doesn't work out for them too well. But they're also like they feel that Jones, where they're like, I mean, I've never done heroin, so but I've seen that in movies where like you need that fix because you've been using it, you're a user, and you can't just detox necessarily on your own at the level they are. So they're trying to use all the government kind of bureaucracy and the social support that's out there, and I think it's set in Detroit. And just sort of like the hoops you have to go through, like, oh, you didn't fill this form out right. We can't admit you were late. And they're like, I just need help. And you want them to help, but they have such great chemistry together. Yeah. It's so much fun to watch, which is weird to say for basically like a buddy trying to get clean drug movie. But it came out shortly after Tupac's death, shortly after his murder. And so it was one of those, I saw it on video as soon as it came out because it wasn't playing around me at the time. Right. And I was a big Tupac fan at the time. So it was like,
I vaguely remember the video box cover. That's what I remember about that film, but I've never seen it. And then honestly,
it's so good.
All right. Yeah. That's good to know.
Because it's shot in that kind of handheld, like quick, not quite Cassavetes style, but it's a very, very loose handheld on the streets, run and gun kind of style too. And it just has energy. And it's one of those that their chemistry just makes the whole thing work.
Awesome. Well, the last film on my list, since we're keeping it to about drug cartels, I felt like I had to talk about Cartel Land because...
Oh, that was so cool. I was like, Cartel Land or Cocaine Cowboys? And
well, but like you said, Cocaine Cowboys is a bit of a flawed movie as opposed to Cartel Land, which is
whatsoever,
pretty much a perfect doc. And just chilling beyond words to see what level of violence there is in Mexico with just rampant beheadings basically of if you cross the wrong people down there. And it's a brutal film, but it's kind of essential, and it really it's just so insane to think about what some people's daily lives are, and how removed I am from that world. And you think about like my reality every day.
Right.
I can honestly say I can't think of the last time I woke up and was worried that I was going to have my head chopped off. It hasn't really happened.
Right, yeah.
As opposed to some of these people like every day, they're living in fear that if so-and-so finds out that, someone did something, then they're going to come after me, they're going to come after my family, they're going to...
Or just accuses you of something.
It's a really chilling documentary, and it's if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it.
It actually is fairly comparable to Combat Obscura, just because it's technically... Looking at the drug war, it's on the border, isn't it? Too, like Juarez,
it's right on the border.
And but like it's 100% a war documentary. Like it is a war zone style because like it's also you have to realize it's a documentary and there's a cameraman, Matthew Heineman there, is just like capturing all of this on camera. You're like, why are you going there? What are you doing?
That's the thing. I remember watching that thinking like you were putting yourself, like he is putting himself and the whole crew really in a dangerous situation because when these people have no problem taking care of anyone they perceive as a threat, it's insane that they put themselves in that kind of danger.
Coming up on next week's episode, we will be discussing, tentatively, we will be opening Ruben Brandt, Collector. We will definitely be opening Gloria Bell, the new film starring Julianne Moore. And we'll also be doing some South by Southwest coverage because that festival will have been wrapped up by then. So next week's Cedar Lee 3 theme, we're going to go with U.S. remakes of foreign films because Sebastian Lelio has made Gloria a couple years ago when we played it here at the theater. And now he is doing an American remake in English with Julianne Moore. We will find out if it's going to be shot for shot or not, like Gus Van Sant did with Psycho. So we'll be discussing U.S. remakes of foreign films. If you have any thoughts or opinions or suggestions for us, submit your picks for U.S. remakes of foreign films at Cedar Lee Theater using the hashtag CedarLee3, the number 3. As always, thank you for tuning in to Cedar Lee Radio and lending us your ears this week. All the music heard on the show is original music written by Grant Heineman and performed by the New Heights Jazz Ensemble, used with their permission, of course. Visit clevelandcinemas.com for correct showtimes and to purchase advance tickets. Also, there are links in the show notes. You can use those if you'd like as well. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Cedar Lee Theater, spelled with an R-E at the end because we're fancy like that. Don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcast, and while you're subscribing, leave us a rating and review, or better yet, tell a fellow film geek about the show. We'll see you at the movies.